The garage light flickered overhead as I worked under the hood of my Ford pickup, the familiar smell of motor oil and rust filling my nostrils. 23 years as an insurance adjuster had taught me that everything breaks down eventually. Cars, houses, marriages. I just never thought mine would be next. Through the thin walls separating the garage from our kitchen, I heard Seren's voice, low and conspiratorial. She was on the phone again, third time this week past 11 o'clock. Her tone had that careful quality she used when she didn't want to be overheard. "I can't keep pretending anymore," she whispered, but sound carried in our old house. "Brooks will sign anything if I smile at him. I'm just so tired of being poor." My wrench slipped, scraping my knuckles against the engine block. Poor. After 22 years of marriage, after working 2 jobs to put her through college, after buying this house in what used to be the decent part of town, that's what she thought of our life together. I set the wrench down carefully and listened. "Next weekend when he's at the conference," she continued. "Your place. We need to figure out how to handle this properly." The kitchen went quiet. I heard her heels clicking across the linoleum, then the soft thud of her feet on the carpeted stairs. Our bedroom door closed with a gentle click that might as well have been a gunshot. I stood there in the garage, wiping grease from my hands with an old rag, trying to process what I'd just heard. 22 years. We'd built this life together from nothing. I'd worked insurance claims during the day and taught boxing at Murphy's gym 3 nights a week just to make ends meet. Seren had started at Dorsey Creative as a junior account coordinator 5 years ago, and I'd been proud when she got promoted to creative director last year. Apparently, that promotion had given her ideas. I walked back into the house, past the kitchen where she'd been planning whatever this was, and up the stairs. Seren was already in bed, her back to me, breathing in that fake steady rhythm that meant she was awake but pretending otherwise. The next morning she was gone before I got up. A note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. S. Don't wait up. How considerate." I made coffee and sat at our small kitchen table, looking out at the backyard where we'd planned to build a deck someday. The grass needed cutting, the fence needed repair, everything needed something, and apparently I wasn't enough to provide it. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister-in-law, Ayla. "Coffee later? I'm back in town." Ayla was Serene's younger sister, the one who'd gotten the college scholarship and spent 4 years studying abroad. She was smart, ambitious, and had always been kind to me even when the rest of Seren's family treated me like hired help at their gatherings. I texted back, "Murphy's Diner, 2 p.m. The rest of the morning dragged. I had 3 claims to investigate: a house fire on Elm Street, a fender bender near the mall, and a suspicious water damage claim that smelled like insurance fraud. Normal work for a normal day, except nothing felt normal anymore. Murphy's Diner sat between a pawn shop and a vacant storefront that used to be a hardware store. The whole downtown area had that tired, forgotten look that came when the big box stores moved in and the local businesses couldn't compete. I arrived early and chose a booth in the back, away from the afternoon crowd of retirees and shift workers. Ayla walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my truck payment. She'd always been the prettier sister, though she never seemed to know it. "Brooks." She slid into the booth across from me and smiled, but I could see concern in her eyes. "You look tired." "Long week," I said. "How was Europe?" "Educational." She studied my face. "How are things with Seren?" Direct question. Ayla had never been one to dance around issues. I respected that about her. "Honestly? I'm not sure." The waitress came over, Dolores, who'd been working here since I was in high school. We ordered coffee and pie, making small talk until she left us alone. "She's different," Ayla said quietly. "Since the promotion. Mom and Dad think it's wonderful, but... She's forgotten where she came from, forgotten who helped her get there." Ayla's eyes met mine. I remember when you worked 2 jobs so she could take those night classes. I remember when you sold your motorcycle to help with her car payment. I had forgotten Ayla knew about the motorcycle. I'd loved that bike. People change, I said. Some people do. Others just show who they really were all along. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, traffic moved slowly down Main Street, people going about their ordinary lives while mine fell apart in slow motion. There's something else, Ayla said. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I saw her last week at Chez Laurent. Chez Laurent was the expensive French place across town, the kind of restaurant where dinner for 2 cost what I made in a day. She wasn't alone, Ayla continued. She was with her boss, Kirk Dorsey. I'd met him exactly once, at the agency Christmas party last year. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore expensive suits and drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. He'd shaken my hand and called me buddy, in that way that made it clear he considered me beneath notice. Maybe it was a business dinner, I said, though I didn't believe it. Ayla's expression told me she didn't believe it either. Maybe, but they were holding hands across the table. The pie arrived, but I'd lost my appetite. Everything was starting to make sense. The late nights, the new clothes, the sudden dissatisfaction with our life together. I'm sorry, Ayla said. I thought you should know. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We finished our coffee in relative silence, talking about safe topics, her job prospects, the weather, anything but the elephant in the room. As we got up to leave, Ayla touched my arm. Brooks, whatever happens, you deserve better than this. That evening, I sat in my truck outside Dorsey Creative, watching the parking lot empty as employees headed home to their families. Seren's Honda was still there, along with a silver Mercedes that I recognized from the agency Christmas party. I waited. At 8:30, they came out together. Seren was laughing at something Kirk had said, her hand on his arm. They walked to his car, and he opened the passenger door for her with the kind of gallant gesture I'd stopped making years ago. They drove to Lakeside Estates, the new development where the houses started at $500,000 and went up from there. Kirk's place was a modern glass and steel structure that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I parked down the street and watched them go inside. The lights came on in what looked like the living room, then the kitchen. An hour later, they moved to the upstairs windows. I drove home to our empty house and sat in the kitchen where I'd overheard that phone call. On the table was Seren's iPad, the one she used for work. She'd forgotten it in her hurry to get to her meeting. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as I picked it up and swiped the screen. But 22 years of marriage had to count for something, and I needed to know how far this had gone. The text messages told the whole story. Kirk, thanks for last night. Next time my place. Seren, can't wait. Brooks is at his conference this weekend. Kirk, good. I have plans for you. There were dozens of them, going back 3 months. Intimate messages, planning sessions, discussions about their future together. In one particularly painful exchange, Kirk asked what she saw in that blue-collar nobody, and Seren replied that I was a phase she'd outgrown. A phase. 22 years reduced to a phase. I set the iPad down and walked out to the garage. My hands were shaking as I picked up my tools, but working with my hands had always helped me think. I had a choice to make. I could confront them, make a scene, play the role of the betrayed husband. I could file for divorce and walk away with whatever the lawyers left me. Or I could do something else entirely. I thought about Ayla's words at the diner. You deserve better than this. She was right, but it wasn't just about what I deserved, it was about consequences, about people learning that actions have prices. I'd spent 23 years investigating insurance fraud, learning how people tried to cheat the system and get away with it. I'd developed a good eye for deception and an even better understanding of how to expose it. Maybe it was time to put those skills to personal use. The next morning, I woke up with the clarity that comes from making a difficult decision. Seren was already gone, another early meeting, and the house felt different somehow. Not empty, but purposeful. I made coffee and sat down with a legal pad, the same kind I used for complex insurance cases. At the top of the page I wrote, Dorsey Kirk, Subject Investigation. 23 years of adjusting claims had taught me that people always leave trails. Financial records, communication logs, behavioral patterns. Everything was documented somewhere if you knew how to look. I started with the obvious. A quick internet search revealed that Kirk Dorsey owned Dorsey Creative outright, lived alone in the Lakeside Estates house, and drove a Tesla Model S in addition to the Mercedes. His ex-wife had moved to California after their divorce 3 years ago, taking a substantial settlement with her. Interesting. The man had a pattern. Next, I checked our joint bank account. Over the past 3 months, Seren had made several large cash withdrawals, always on days when she claimed to be working late. The amounts were carefully kept under $500, small enough not to trigger automatic alerts, large enough to fund a secret life. I printed out the bank statements and highlighted the relevant dates. They corresponded perfectly with the text messages on her iPad. My phone rang. Brooks Carvin. Hey Brooks, it's Vince Murphy. Vince owned Murphy's Gym, where I taught boxing 3 nights a week. He was a straight shooter, a former Marine who'd built his business from nothing and understood the value of loyalty. What's up, Vince? Got a minute to talk? Something weird happened last night. I drove to the gym, a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. The smell of sweat and leather hit me as soon as I walked in. Familiar, honest smells that reminded me of simpler times. Vince was in his office, a cramped space overlooking the main floor where a few early afternoon regulars were working the heavy bags. Coffee? He poured 2 cups from a pot that had seen better days. Thanks. What's this about? Your wife came by yesterday, around 6 o'clock. I set down my cup. Seren? Here? Yeah. Said she was looking for you, but I told her you weren't scheduled until Thursday. Then she started asking questions about the business, about whether you made any money teaching here. Vince frowned. It was strange, Brooks, like she was fishing for information. What kind of information? Whether you had any income she didn't know about. Whether you kept money here, whether you'd ever talked about leaving town. He leaned back in his chair. I didn't like her tone, so I kept my answers short. But I thought you should know. So Seren was investigating me while I was investigating her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thanks for the heads up. Brooks? Vince's expression was serious. I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the most honest guys I've ever met. Whatever's going on at home, don't let anyone make you feel like you're the problem. I left the gym with more questions than answers. Why was Seren checking up on my finances? Was she planning to claim I'd hidden assets during the divorce proceedings? Or was she just being thorough, making sure there weren't any surprises? Either way, it told me she was thinking several steps ahead. I needed to do the same. That afternoon, I drove to Dorsey Creative. The building was a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. Very modern, very expensive. I parked across the street and waited. At 5:15, employees started leaving. I recognized several faces from the Christmas party, young, ambitious types who dressed better than I could afford and drove cars that cost more than my annual salary. Seren emerged at 5:30, but she didn't head for the parking garage. Instead, she walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop called Grind. Through the window, I watched her order something elaborate and sit down with her phone. 5 minutes later, a woman joined her. I recognized her immediately. Margot Lynn, Seren's best friend from college and now a senior account manager at the agency. Margot had never liked me, making it clear at social gatherings that she thought Seren had married beneath her potential. They talked for 20 minutes, their conversation animated and intense. At one point, Margot pulled out her own phone and showed Seren something that made them both laugh. When they left the coffee shop, they went in different directions. Seren walked back toward the agency, while Margot headed for the parking garage. I followed Margot. She drove a white BMW to a condo complex in the trendy part of town. I watched her go inside, then called Ayla. "It's Brooks. Are you free for dinner?" "Sure. Everything okay?" "I'll explain when I see you. Can you meet me at Romano's in an hour?" Romano's was a family restaurant in the old neighborhood, the kind of place where the portions were generous and the prices reasonable. Ayla was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a glass of wine. "You look like someone who's had a very long day," she said as I sat down. "That's an understatement." I ordered a beer and tried to figure out how much to tell her. "This is about Seren, isn't it?" I nodded. "How well do you know Margot Lynn?" "Margot?" Ayla's expression darkened. "Unfortunately, quite well. She's been Seren's friend since college, and she's always been a terrible influence." "How so?" "Margot thinks marriage is a business transaction. She divorced her first husband because he was only a teacher, then married a lawyer who turned out to be a cheater. Now she's single again and bitter about it." Ayla sipped her wine. "She's also the one who convinced Seren to apply for the job at Dorsey Creative." "Did she know Kirk before Seren started working there?" "I think so. They moved in the same social circles." Ayla studied my face. "Brooks, what's really going on?" I made a decision. Seren's having an affair with her boss. Ayla didn't look surprised. I wondered. She's been different lately, secretive, defensive, and she's been asking Mom and Dad about their will. Their will. Who inherits what? How the assets are structured. She claimed it was just curiosity, but Mom found it odd. Ayla leaned forward. "There's something else. Last week, she asked me if I thought you'd contest a divorce if she filed." The pieces were falling into place. Seren wasn't just having an affair, she was planning an exit strategy. And from the sound of it, she wanted to make sure she got as much as possible on her way out. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that if she was thinking about leaving you, she should consider what she'd be giving up. You're the best thing that ever happened to her, and she's too stupid to see it." Our food arrived, but I'd lost my appetite again. Everything I'd learned today painted the same picture. Serene and her circle of friends saw me as an obstacle to overcome, not a person worth considering. "Ayla, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If things go bad between Seren and me, really bad, would you be willing to help me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes. What do you need?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of Seren and Margot at the coffee shop. "I need to know what they're planning. Margot works at the same agency, so she's probably involved in whatever this is." "You want me to spy on my own sister?" "I want you to protect yourself. If Seren's planning to take me for everything I'm worth, she's probably not going to be generous with family members who don't support her decisions." Ayla was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. She's already started treating me differently since I got back from Europe, like I'm competition or something. Will you help?" "Yes, but Brooks, whatever you're planning, be careful. Serene's not the same person you married. She's harder now, more calculating, and Kirk Dorsey has money and connections." "I understand." "Do you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're outnumbered and outgunned." I smiled for the first time in days. "Maybe, but they don't know they're in a fight yet." We finished dinner and made plans to meet again in a few days. As I drove home, I thought about what Ayla had said. She was right. I was outnumbered and outgunned, but I had something they didn't: patience and experience investigating people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. In my line of work, those were the easiest ones to catch. The next few days fell into a routine. I went to work, investigated my assigned claims, and played the role of the oblivious husband. But every spare moment was dedicated to building my case against Seren and Kirk. I started with financial records. Our joint account showed the pattern of cash withdrawals, but I needed more detail. A call to an old contact at the bank, someone I'd worked with on fraud cases, got me copies of the actual withdrawal slips. Seren had been careful to use different ATMs, but they were all in the same general area, downtown, near expensive restaurants and boutiques. Next, I tackled social media. Seren rarely posted personal information, but her friends were less careful. Margot's Instagram account was a goldmine of information, showing expensive dinners, weekend trips, and social gatherings where Seren appeared more and more frequently. In one particularly revealing photo from 2 weeks ago, Seren was at some kind of rooftop party, wearing a dress I'd never seen before and laughing at something off camera. The location tag showed it was at Kirk's house. I screenshotted everything and organized it chronologically. The pattern was clear. Over the past 3 months, Seren had been living a double life, spending money we didn't have on clothes and experiences that didn't include me. Thursday evening, I was at Murphy's gym teaching a boxing class when my phone buzzed with a text from Ayla. "Coffee tomorrow? I have information." We met at a different place this time, a small cafe near the college where we were less likely to run into anyone we knew. Ayla looked tired, but there was a determined set to her jaw that reminded me of her sister, back when Seren still had principles. "I had lunch with Margot yesterday," she said without preamble. "Told her I was worried about Seren, that she seemed stressed lately." "What did she say?" "She said Seren was going through a transition period, and that sometimes people had to make hard choices to get what they deserved." Ayla stirred her coffee absently. Then she asked me what I thought about Kirk Dorsey. And I played dumb. Said I'd never met him but heard he was successful. Margot got this smug look and said Seren was lucky to have someone who appreciated her potential. The phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. Appreciated her potential. As if 22 years of marriage had been holding Seren back instead of building her up. "There's more," Ayla continued. "Margot mentioned that Seren was planning to file for divorce next month. She's already been to see a lawyer." "Which lawyer?" "Harrison, Blackstone and Associates, the expensive firm downtown." I knew them by reputation. They specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for being ruthless. Their retainer alone was more than I made in 3 months. "How is she paying for that?" Margot didn't say, but she made some comment about how Seren wouldn't have to worry about money much longer. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Seren had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The affair with Kirk wasn't just about romance, it was about upgrading her entire life, and I was the obstacle she needed to remove. "There's something else," Ayla said. "Margot asked me what I thought about you." "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were the most decent man I knew, and that Seren was making the biggest mistake of her life." Ayla's eyes flashed with anger. She laughed and said decent didn't pay for the kind of life Seren wanted. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, college students walked past the window, young and optimistic, probably believing that love conquered all. I envied their naivety. "Brooks, I need to tell you something else, something I probably should have mentioned before." I waited. "Kirk Dorsey has a history. His ex-wife wasn't his first divorce. He was married once before to a woman named Patricia Kellerman. She was an employee at his previous agency." "What happened?" "According to the gossip, he seduced her away from her husband, promised her the world, then dumped her when someone younger came along. She ended up with nothing because she'd signed a prenup that his lawyers had crafted very carefully." "And his second wife?" "Smarter. She had her own lawyer and got a decent settlement. But the pattern is clear. Kirk likes married women because the thrill of the chase appeals to him. Once he's won, he gets bored." This was useful information, but it also raised a disturbing question. "How do you know all this?" Ayla looked uncomfortable. "Because I used to date someone who worked at his old agency. This was years ago, before Seren even met Kirk. My ex told me stories about Kirk's reputation." "Why didn't you warn Seren?" "I tried. When she first started working there, I mentioned that Kirk had a reputation as a player. She brushed it off, said she could handle herself. Ayla's voice was bitter. Apparently, she was wrong. That evening, I sat in my truck outside Harrison, Blackstone and Associates, watching the building empty as the workday ended. At 6:30, I saw her, Seren, walking out with a well-dressed woman who could only be her attorney. They stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, deep in conversation. The lawyer handed Seren a folder, and they shook hands before going their separate ways. I followed Seren, but instead of heading home or to Kirk's place, she drove to Chez Laurent, the expensive French restaurant where Ayla had first spotted her with Kirk. This time, she was meeting someone else. A man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. I parked where I could see them through the restaurant's windows. Their conversation looked serious, businesslike. The man took notes while Seren talked, occasionally nodding or asking questions. After an hour, they finished their meal and shook hands in the parking lot. The man handed Seren his business card before getting into a black Lexus. I waited until he was gone, then approached his car and memorized the license plate. A quick online search the next morning revealed that the Lexus was registered to David Chen, a private investigator who specialized in asset discovery and divorce cases. So Seren had hired not just a lawyer, but a private investigator. She was building a case against me, probably trying to prove I had hidden assets or income that she could claim in the divorce. The irony was perfect. While she was investigating me, I was investigating her. The difference was that I actually had something to find. That weekend, Seren announced she was going to a team-building retreat with her colleagues. She'd be gone from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon, staying at some resort an hour outside the city. I wished her a good trip and helped her load her overnight bag into the Honda. As soon as she was gone, I drove to Kirk's house in Lakeside Estates. The neighborhood was quiet on Friday evening, most residents probably out at dinner or social events. I parked 2 streets over and walked back, staying in the shadows cast by the expensive landscaping. Kirk's house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see him and Seren in the living room, sharing a bottle of wine and looking very comfortable together. I took photos with my phone, careful to stay hidden. The pictures weren't perfect, but they clearly showed the two of them together in an intimate setting, while Seren was supposedly at a work retreat. Around 10 o'clock, they moved upstairs. The bedroom lights came on, then went out an hour later. I had what I needed, but I wasn't done yet. I walked around to the back of the house, where Kirk's Tesla was parked in the driveway. The car was beautiful, sleek, expensive, everything my old Ford pickup wasn't. From my pocket, I pulled out a key I'd had made earlier that week. Not a car key, but a simple house key that I'd filed down to a sharp point. I walked along the driver's side of the Tesla, letting the key scrape against the paint in a long, deliberate line. It wasn't vandalism. It was a message. I repeated the process on the passenger side, then the hood. By the time I was finished, Kirk's beautiful car looked like it had been attacked by someone with a serious grudge. From my other pocket, I pulled out something else, an old hand wrap from my boxing gear, stained with sweat and marked with my initials. I tied it to the driver's side mirror and stepped back to admire my work. Let Kirk try to explain that to his insurance company. I was back home by midnight, sitting in my kitchen with a beer and a satisfied smile. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. I'd gathered the intelligence I needed and sent a warning shot across their bow. Now, it was time to see how they'd respond. Saturday morning, my phone rang at 7:30. I was already awake, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper like any normal weekend morning. "Brooks!" Seren's voice was tight with panic. "Something terrible happened." "What's wrong?" I kept my voice concerned but calm. "Someone vandalized Kirk's car, scratched it all up and left some kind of threat." "That's awful. Did you call the police?" "Kirk did. They're treating it as random vandalism, but, Brooks, what if it wasn't random? What if someone knows about... She caught herself before finishing the sentence. Knows about what? Nothing. Never mind, I'm scared. Where are you? I thought you were at that retreat. A pause. I am. Kirk's here too. It's a joint retreat with another agency. Smooth recovery, but not smooth enough. I could hear traffic in the background, and I knew Kirk's neighborhood was quiet on weekend mornings. Well, I'm sure the police will figure it out. These things usually turn out to be kids or someone with too much to drink. Yeah, you're probably right. She sounded like she was trying to convince herself. I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. Drive safe. After she hung up, I sat back and smiled. The warning shot had hit its target. They were rattled, looking over their shoulders, wondering who knew their secret. But I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I drove to Murphy's gym for my regular Saturday workout. Vince was there as always, keeping an eye on the weekend crowd. You look pleased with yourself, he said as I wrapped my hands for the heavy bag. Just a good day, I guess. Heard there was some excitement over in Lakeside Estates last night. Someone keyed up a fancy car. I kept my expression neutral. Really? Yeah. Friend of mine works security for that neighborhood. Said it was a real professional job. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. Vince's eyes met mine. Left a calling card, too. Boxing hand wrap. Interesting, isn't it? Vince smiled. Whoever did it must have been sending a message. I spent an hour working the heavy bag, letting my frustrations flow through my fists into the leather. Each punch was for a lie Seren had told, a promise she'd broken, a year of marriage she'd thrown away for a man who collected wives like trophies. When I was done, Vince walked over with a towel and a bottle of water. Brooks, you know I don't judge people for their personal business. I appreciate that. But if someone was hypothetically planning something that might get them in trouble, I'd tell them to be smart about it. Use their head, not their fists. Good advice. The smart fighter doesn't just hit hard, he hits where it hurts most, and he makes sure his opponent doesn't see it coming. I understood. Vince was telling me to be strategic, not emotional. To think like an investigator, not like a betrayed husband. Sunday afternoon, Seren came home from her retreat looking tired and stressed. She went straight upstairs to shower and change, claiming she needed to wash off the smell of the resort's chlorinated pool. While she was upstairs, I checked her overnight bag. Mixed in with her clothes was a hotel bathrobe from the Marriott downtown, not from any resort. She'd been sloppy, probably too shaken by the vandalism to think clearly. That evening, we had dinner together for the first time in weeks. Seren picked at her food and kept checking her phone, jumping every time it buzzed with a notification. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. Just work stuff. How was the retreat? Good. Productive. We did some team-building exercises, talked about quarterly goals. The lies came easily, but I could see the strain in her eyes. Sounds boring. It was, mostly. She set down her fork. Brooks, can I ask you something? Sure. Have you noticed anyone suspicious around the house lately? Strange cars? People who don't belong in the neighborhood? I pretended to think about it. Not really, why? Just wondering. With all the break-ins lately, I want to make sure we're being careful. There hadn't been any break-ins in our neighborhood, but I didn't point that out. Instead, I reached across the table and took her hand. Hey, if you're worried about security, I can install some motion lights in the driveway. Maybe get one of those doorbell cameras. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, grateful for my protection. Then her phone buzzed again and the mask slipped back into place. That's okay. I'm probably just being paranoid. That night, I lay awake listening to Seren toss and turn beside me. Around 2 a.m, she got up and went downstairs. I heard her moving around in the kitchen, then the soft murmur of her voice on the phone. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. I don't know who it could be. she was saying. Maybe someone from work, or one of Brooks's friends from the gym. A pause. No, I don't think he knows anything. He's been acting normal. Another pause. Okay. Yes. I'll be careful. I love you too. She hung up and came back upstairs, slipping into bed like nothing had happened. But I could feel the tension radiating from her body, the way she held herself rigid to avoid touching me. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the public library. Using one of their computers, I created an anonymous email account and sent a message to Kirk's business email. Mr. Dorsey, I think you should know that your employee Seren Carvin has been stealing from the agency. Check the petty cash records for the past 3 months. A concerned colleague. It wasn't true. I had no evidence that Seren was stealing. But it would make Kirk suspicious, force him to question her, maybe even investigate her activities. Trust was a fragile thing, and I was about to start chipping away at theirs. The next day, Ayla called with an update. I had drinks with Margot last night, she said. She mentioned that there's some tension at the agency. Apparently, Kirk's been asking questions about expense reports and petty cash. Really? Margot seemed worried. She said Kirk was acting paranoid, like he thought someone was watching him. Perfect. The anonymous email had done its job. There's something else, Ayla continued. Margot let slip that Serene's been staying late to help Kirk with some kind of special project. She made it sound very mysterious and important. Any idea what kind of project? No, but Margot seemed to think it was related to expanding the business. New offices, new clients, that sort of thing. After we hung up, I sat in my truck outside the library, thinking about what Ayla had told me. A special project that required late nights and secrecy. It could be legitimate business, but given everything else I knew, it was probably something more personal. I decided it was time to escalate things. That evening, I drove to Chez Laurent and requested a table near the window. I ordered an expensive bottle of wine and settled in to wait. At 8 o'clock, Kirk and Seren arrived for what was obviously a planned dinner. They were seated across the restaurant from me, but I had a clear view of their table. They looked nervous, constantly scanning the room and speaking in low voices. Kirk kept checking his phone, and Seren jumped every time the waiter approached their table. Halfway through their meal, I got up and walked past their table on my way to the restroom. I didn't stop or acknowledge them, but I made sure they saw me. The effect was immediate. Seren went pale, and Kirk's wine glass slipped from his hand, spilling red wine across their white tablecloth. I continued to the restroom, washed my hands slowly, then returned to my table. Kirk and Seren were gone, their meals barely touched, money thrown hastily on the table. I finished my wine and paid my check, leaving a generous tip for the confused waiter. As I walked to my truck, I could see Kirk's Mercedes speeding out of the parking lot. They were running scared now, looking over their shoulders, wondering how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. The answer was simple: everything, and more than they could imagine. The next few days brought a welcome change in routine. Seren started coming home earlier, claiming that Kirk had canceled several late meetings due to security concerns. She was jumpy, distracted, checking the locks on our doors twice each night, and peering through the curtains at every car that drove down our street. I played the concerned husband perfectly, asking if everything was all right at work and offering to drive her to and from the office if she felt unsafe. She declined, but I could see the internal struggle. Part of her wanted my protection, even as she planned to betray me. On Thursday, Ayla called with more intelligence. "Margot's getting suspicious," she said. "She asked me point blank if I thought you knew about Seren and Kirk." "What did you tell her?" "I said you were completely clueless, that you trusted Seren completely and would never think to question her." Ayla's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "I may have oversold it a bit, made you sound almost pathetically naive." "Perfect. What else?" "Kirk's hired a security consultant. someone to sweep his house for bugs and check his car for tracking devices. That was interesting. Kirk was spending money to protect himself from a threat he couldn't identify. Fear made people do expensive, irrational things. Oh, and Brooks? Margot mentioned that Seren's been asking about our family's finances, specifically about the trust fund Dad set up for emergencies. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of questions? How much is in it? Who has access? Whether it could be used for legal fees? Ayla's voice was grim. I think she's planning to ask our parents for money to help with her divorce. This was a new development, and a troubling one. If Seren's parents funded her legal battle, she could afford to drag the divorce out for months, maybe years. I needed to move faster. Ayla, I need you to do something for me. It might be risky. I'm listening. I need you to tell Margot that you're worried about me, that I've been acting strange lately, asking questions about Seren's schedule, maybe even following her. You want me to make them think you're getting suspicious? Exactly. But not too suspicious, just enough to make them nervous. What are you planning? I'm going to give them a chance to make a mistake. That evening, I put my plan into motion. I made sure Seren saw me looking through our insurance policies, frowning and making notes. When she asked what I was doing, I told her I was reviewing our coverage to make sure we were protected against theft and vandalism. You know, after what happened to your boss's car, I want to make sure our property is secure. She went pale. What do you mean? Well, if someone's targeting people in the business community, they might go after employees too. I'm just being careful. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out if I was being genuinely protective or if I knew more than I was letting on. The next day, I took a personal day from work and drove to Dorsey Creative. Instead of hiding across the street, I parked right in the visitor's lot and walked into the building. The receptionist, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, looked up as I approached. I'm here to see my wife, Seren Carvin. Oh, Mr. Carvin. I don't think Seren mentioned you were coming by. It's a surprise. I brought her lunch. I held up a bag from her favorite sandwich shop. The receptionist looked uncertain. Let me call her. Actually, could you just direct me to her office? I'd rather surprise her. I think she's in a meeting with Mr. Dorsey. Conference room B. Perfect. I'll wait in her office until they're done. The receptionist gave me directions, and I walked through the agency's open floor plan, drawing curious stares from employees who recognized me from the Christmas party. I found Seren's office, a small but well-appointed space with a view of the parking lot. I set the lunch bag on her desk and looked around. Her computer was locked, but her desk calendar was open, showing appointments and meetings for the week. Several entries were marked KD, private, with times that extended well past normal business hours. I took photos of the calendar with my phone, then sat down in her chair to wait. 5 minutes later, Seren burst through the door, her face flushed with panic. Brooks, what are you doing here? I brought you lunch. The receptionist said you were in a meeting, so I thought I'd wait. Behind her, Kirk Dorsey appeared in the doorway. He looked older than I remembered, stress lines around his eyes and a nervous tic in his left cheek. Mr. Carvin, he said, forcing a smile. What a pleasant surprise. Mr. Dorsey. I stood up and extended my hand. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all. Seren and I were just discussing the Morrison account. I nodded as if this meant something to me. Well, don't let me keep you. I just wanted to make sure my wife was eating properly. She's been working such long hours lately. Kirk's smile faltered slightly. We've had some demanding clients recently. I'm sure you have. I looked around the office, taking in the expensive furniture and artwork. Beautiful space you have here. Very impressive. Thank you. Must cost a fortune to maintain, but I suppose success has its rewards. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Kirk's face reddened slightly, but he kept his composure. We've been very fortunate. Indeed. I turned to Seren. Well, honey, I'll let you get back to work. Enjoy your lunch. I kissed her cheek, she was trembling slightly, and walked past Kirk with a nod. Mr. Dorsey, always a pleasure. As I left the office, I could hear them talking in urgent whispers behind me. The entire floor had gone quiet, employees pretending to work while obviously listening to every word. I walked slowly through the office, nodding to people I recognized, taking my time. By the time I reached the elevator, I could feel dozens of eyes on my back. Perfect. Let them wonder what I was really doing there. That evening, Seren came home early and went straight to the kitchen, where I was preparing dinner. What was that about today? She demanded. What do you mean? You know what I mean. Showing up at my office unannounced. I looked hurt. I thought you'd be happy to see me. I brought you lunch from that place you like. You could have called first. I wanted to surprise you. Is that a crime? She studied my face, trying to read my intentions. It's just unprofessional. People will talk. About what? A husband bringing his wife lunch? You don't understand office politics. You're right, I don't. I turned back to the stove. I'm just a simple insurance adjuster. I don't understand a lot of things about your world. The comment was calculated to make her feel guilty, and it worked. Her expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I'm just stressed about work. Anything I can help with? No, it's just complicated business stuff. We ate dinner in relative silence, but I could see her mind working, trying to figure out if my visit to her office was innocent or something more calculated. Later that night, I heard her on the phone again, speaking in low, urgent tones. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was scared. Good. Fear made people careless, and I was counting on Seren and Kirk to make a mistake that would give me the opening I needed. I didn't have long to wait. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the garage working on my truck's transmission when Ayla pulled into the driveway. She looked upset. Her usually composed demeanor cracked around the edges. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I wiped my hands on a rag and followed her into the house. Seren was at her yoga class, or at least that's where she claimed to be going when she left an hour ago. What's wrong? Ayla sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out her phone. Margot called me last night. She was drunk and angry, and she said some things I don't think she meant to say. Such as? She told me that Kirk's been having second thoughts about Seren. Apparently all the stress from the car vandalism and your surprise visit to the office has made him nervous about being seen with her. I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from her. Go on? According to Margot, Kirk thinks you might be more suspicious than you're letting on. He's worried that you're building a case against them. Smart man. There's more. Margot said that Seren's been pressuring Kirk to make their relationship public, but he wants to wait until after her divorce is final. They've been fighting about it. This was interesting. Cracks in the foundation of their relationship meant opportunities for me to exploit. But here's the really important part, Ayla continued. Margot let slip that they're planning something for next weekend. Some kind of grand gesture to force the issue. What kind of gesture? She wouldn't say exactly, but she mentioned something about making it impossible for you to ignore what's happening. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They're going to confront me. That's what I think. And Brooks, there's something else. Something I should have told you weeks ago. I waited. Kirk Dorsey isn't just Serene's boss. He's also a client of Harrison, Blackstone and Associates, the same law firm Seren's using for the divorce. The implications hit me like a physical blow. He's funding her legal fees. More than that. According to Margot, he's been advising Seren's lawyers on strategy. He's done this before, remember? He knows how to destroy a marriage and come out ahead. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 15 years. Suddenly, it felt like enemy territory. There's one more thing, Ayla said quietly. Margot mentioned that they've been investigating your finances, looking for hidden assets, unreported income, anything they can use to claim you've been deceptive. Have they found anything? Not yet, but that's not the point. They're building a narrative that you're untrustworthy, that you've been hiding things from Seren throughout your marriage. I turned back to face her. And what's your family's position on all this? Ayla's expression was pained. Mom and Dad don't know the details yet. Seren's been feeding them a story about growing apart, irreconcilable differences. They think it's a mutual decision. But you know better. I know my sister, and I know she's making the biggest mistake of her life. Ayla stood up and walked over to me. Brooks, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. What are you really planning? Because whatever it is, it needs to happen soon. Seren's going to file for divorce next Friday. Next Friday. 1 week from today. The timeline had just accelerated dramatically. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I said. A confrontation, but not the kind they're expecting. That afternoon, while Seren was supposedly at the grocery store, I drove to Murphy's gym. Vince was in his office reviewing the books for the month. I need a favor, I told him. Name it. I need you to host a party next Saturday night. Nothing fancy, just a casual get-together for friends and family. Vince looked puzzled. What's the occasion? I'm going to announce my divorce. Jesus, Brooks, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I sat down across from his desk. But I need to do it right. I need witnesses, people who can testify to what really happened. What do you need from me? Just the space and your word that you'll back me up if things get ugly. You've got it. But Brooks, be careful. Cornered animals do desperate things. That evening, I started making phone calls. I invited my co-workers from the insurance company, friends from the neighborhood, and several relatives I hadn't seen in months. I made it sound like a casual party, nothing special, just an opportunity to catch up with people. The last call I made was to Seren's parents. Robert, it's Brooks. I'm having a little get-together next Saturday at Murphy's gym, and I'd love for you and Margaret to come. That sounds nice, Brooks. What's the occasion? Nothing special. I just realized it's been too long since we all got together as a family. We'll be there. Should we bring anything? Just yourselves. Oh, and feel free to invite Ayla. I know she's been feeling a bit disconnected since she got back from Europe. When Seren came home that evening, I mentioned the party casually, as if it had just occurred to me. I thought it might be nice to see everyone, I said. We've been so busy with work lately, we've lost touch with people. She looked suspicious. Since when do you organize social events? Since I realized how important family and friends are. Life's too short to take people for granted. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Will Kirk be invited? She asked carefully. Why would I invite your boss to a family gathering? No reason. I just thought, since we work together. Seren, this is about us, our friends, our family. Kirk Dorsey doesn't fit into that category. She nodded, but I could see her mind working. She was probably already planning how to warn Kirk, how to make sure he stayed away from what she undoubtedly suspected was some kind of trap. She was right to be suspicious, but she was wrong about the nature of the trap. I wasn't planning to ambush Kirk at the party. I was planning something much more devastating. Over the next few days, I put the finishing touches on my plan. I contacted a friend who worked in IT security and asked him to help me with a small technical project. I visited a print shop and ordered several dozen copies of a document I'd been preparing. I even bought a new suit for the occasion. By Friday afternoon, everything was in place. Seren had filed for divorce that morning, just as Ayla had predicted. The papers were served to me at work by a professional courier who apologized for the inconvenience. I read through the documents carefully. Seren was claiming irreconcilable differences and asking for half of everything we owned, plus alimony. She was also requesting that I pay her legal fees. The final insult was a restraining order request, claiming that I had been increasingly erratic and potentially threatening in recent weeks. She cited my visit to her office and several other incidents that had been carefully twisted to make me sound unstable. I called my own lawyer, a straightforward guy named Tom Patterson who specialized in family law, and scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning. Then I went home to prepare for the party. Seren was in the bedroom, packing clothes into a suitcase. "Going somewhere?" I asked. "I'm staying at Margot's for a few days. I think we both need some space to process things." "Process things?" She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. "Brooks, I know this is hard, but we both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time." "Do we?" "Don't make this harder than it has to be. We can be adults about this." I nodded slowly. "You're right. We should be adults." She looked relieved. "I'm glad you're being reasonable." "Oh, I'm being very reasonable. In fact, I think tomorrow's party is exactly what we need." Her relief evaporated. "What do you mean?" "Well, since you filed for divorce, I think our friends and family deserve to know what's happening, don't you?" She went pale. "Brooks, you can't what? Tell people the truth about our marriage? It's not that simple, isn't it?" I smiled, and she took a step backward. "I think it's very simple, actually. You fell out of love with me and in love with someone else. These things happen. Please don't do anything you'll regret." "Regret? Seren, the only thing I regret is not seeing this coming sooner." She finished packing in silence and left without saying goodbye. I watched from the window as she drove away, probably heading straight to Kirk's house to warn him about tomorrow's party. Let her warn him, it wouldn't matter, because tomorrow everyone would learn the truth about Seren Carvin and Kirk Dorsey, and by the time the evening was over, their carefully constructed lies would be in ruins. I had one more phone call to make. "Ayla, it's Brooks. Are you ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "What do you need me to do?" "Just be yourself, and when the time comes, tell everyone the truth about what you've seen and heard." "Brooks?" "Yeah?" "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." "Thanks. That means more to me than you know." After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and thought about the past 22 years. All the dreams we'd shared, all the plans we'd made, all the promises that turned out to be lies. Tomorrow, it would all be over. And for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for early October. I dressed carefully in my new suit, charcoal gray, well-tailored, the kind of outfit that commanded respect. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Gone was the tired, defeated husband who'd been sleepwalking through his marriage. In his place stood someone harder, more focused, someone with nothing left to lose. I arrived at Murphy's gym at 6:30, an hour before the party was scheduled to start. Vince had transformed the main floor into a respectable event space, moving the equipment aside and setting up tables with white tablecloths. A small bar occupied one corner, staffed by his nephew Danny. "You clean up nice," Vince said as I walked in. "Thanks for doing this." "Don't mention it. You sure you're ready for whatever's about to happen?" I patted the folder under my arm. "I've been ready for weeks." The guests started arriving at 7. My co-workers from the insurance company came first, followed by neighbors and old friends I hadn't seen in months. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there, commenting on how nice it was to have a reason to get together. Serene's parents arrived at 7:15. Robert and Margaret Kellerman were in their 70s, dignified people who'd built a successful accounting practice from nothing. They'd always been kind to me, treating me like the son they'd never had. That was about to change. "Brooks," Margaret hugged me warmly. "What a lovely idea, having everyone together like this." "I thought it was time," I said. There are some things I need to share with the people who matter most to me. Ayla arrived shortly after her parents, looking elegant in a simple black dress. She caught my eye and nodded slightly. She was ready. By 8 o'clock, the gym was full of conversation and laughter. People were catching up, sharing stories, enjoying the food and drinks. It felt like a real celebration, which made what I was about to do even more effective. At 8:15, Seren arrived. She'd clearly agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a conservative blue dress that made her look younger and more innocent. She'd brought Margot as backup, probably hoping that her friend's presence would somehow protect her from whatever I had planned. She was wrong. "Brooks," she said, approaching me with a nervous smile. "This is nice. I'm glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you'd come." "Of course I came. These are our friends." "Some of them." I looked around the room. Though I noticed Kirk didn't make it. Her smile faltered. "Why would he be here?" "No reason. I just thought, since you two are so close, he might want to support you during this difficult time." Margot stepped forward, her expression hostile. "Brooks, I hope you're not planning to make a scene." "A scene? Margot, I'm hurt. This is a celebration." "A celebration of what?" I smiled. "You'll see." At 8:30, I walked to the center of the room and tapped a spoon against my beer bottle. The conversation gradually died as people turned to face me. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "It means the world to me to have so many important people in one place." Murmurs of appreciation from the crowd. Seren stood near the back, her face pale but composed. "I know some of you are wondering why I organized this gathering. The truth is, there's something I need to share with all of you, something important about my marriage to Seren." The room went completely quiet. I could see Robert and Margaret exchange worried glances. As many of you know, Seren and I have been married for 22 years. We've built a life together, shared dreams and disappointments, supported each other through good times and bad. I paused, letting the sentiment sink in. Unfortunately, that chapter of our lives is ending. Seren filed for divorce yesterday. Gasps from several people. Margaret put her hand to her mouth in shock. Robert's face darkened with concern. "Now, I know what you're thinking. These things happen. People grow apart. Sometimes love just isn't enough." I looked directly at Seren, who was frozen in place. "But I think you all deserve to know the real reason our marriage is ending. Seren didn't just fall out of love with me. She fell in love with someone else." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. People started looking around, trying to gauge reactions, unsure of how to respond. Her boss, to be specific, Kirk Dorsey, owner of Dorsey Creative. Seren's face went white. "Brooks, don't what? Tell the truth?" I opened the folder I'd been carrying and pulled out a stack of photographs. These were taken 2 weeks ago at Kirk's house in Lakeside Estates, while Seren was supposedly at a work retreat. I held up the first photo, a clear shot of Seren and Kirk embracing on his patio. Several people in the crowd craned their necks to see. This affair has been going on for at least 3 months. During that time, Seren has been stealing money from our joint account to fund her secret life. She's been lying to all of us, pretending to be the devoted wife while planning her exit strategy. "That's enough." Seren's voice was shrill with panic. "You have no right." "I have every right. These people care about you, Seren. They deserve to know who you really are." I pulled out more photographs, bank statements, copies of text messages, receipts from expensive restaurants and hotels. Kirk Dorsey has a pattern. This is his 3rd marriage to an employee. He seduces married women, promises them a better life, then discards them when the novelty wears off. Margaret was crying now. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes. "The really sad part," I continued, "is that Seren actually believes he loves her. She thinks she's different from his previous victims." "Stop it!" Seren was sobbing now. "Just stop!" "I'm almost done." I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a document. This is a financial report on Kirk Dorsey's assets. Turns out, he's not as wealthy as he pretends to be. The agency is mortgaged to the hilt, his house is leveraged, and he's been using company funds to maintain his lifestyle. The room was completely silent except for Seren's crying. So when Kirk promised Seren a life of luxury, he was lying, just like she's been lying to all of us. I folded the papers and put them back in the folder. I wanted you all to hear this from me, because I respect you too much to let you find out from gossip or newspaper articles. Seren made her choice, and now she has to live with the consequences. I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years, people who'd welcomed me into their lives, who'd trusted me with their friendship. I know this is shocking and painful. I'm sorry for that, but I thought you deserved the truth. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Robert stepped forward, his face rigid with anger. "Seren Elizabeth Kellerman," he said in a voice I'd never heard before. "Is this true?" Seren couldn't meet his eyes. "Daddy, it's not. It's more complicated than—" "Is it true?" "Yes," she whispered. Margaret's sob echoed through the gym. Several of our friends looked away, unable to watch the family's pain. "Get out," Robert said quietly. "Daddy, please, get out of my sight. You are not my daughter." Margot grabbed Serene's arm and led her toward the exit, but not before Seren turned back to face me. "I hope you're satisfied," she said through her tears. "Actually," I replied, "I am." They left, and the room remained silent for several more minutes. Finally, Ayla stepped forward. "I need to say something," she announced. "What Brooks just told you is true. I've seen the evidence myself, but there's more." She looked around the room, making eye contact with her parents. "Seren asked me to help her get money from the family trust to pay for her divorce lawyers. She wanted me to lie to Mom and Dad about why she needed it." Margaret gasped. "The trust fund? That's for emergencies." "She said her emergency was getting away from Brooks as quickly as possible, with as much money as she could take." Robert's hands were clenched into fists. 22 years. Brooks worked 2 jobs to put her through college. He's been nothing but loyal and devoted. "I know, Dad. That's why I couldn't help her. And that's why I'm here tonight, supporting the man who's always been more of a brother to me than she's been a sister." Ayla walked over and stood beside me. "Brooks asked me to come with him to Mom and Dad's anniversary party next weekend, and I said yes." The implications of that statement rippled through the room. In one night, I'd exposed Seren's betrayal and gained the support of her own family. The party broke up shortly after that. People approached me individually to offer their support, their shock, their apologies for what I'd been through. Robert and Margaret both hugged me, Margaret whispering that I would always be family to them, regardless of what happened with the divorce. By 10 o'clock, only Ayla, Vince, and I remained in the gym. "Well," Vince said as he started cleaning up. "That was something." "How do you feel?" Ayla asked me. I thought about it for a moment. "Lighter. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there." "What happens now?" "Now I go home to my empty house and start figuring out what the rest of my life looks like." "You won't be alone," Ayla said. "I meant what I said about the anniversary party." "Are you sure? Your family is going to need time to process all this." "My family will be fine. We're stronger than Seren thinks." Ayla smiled. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't spend the rest of your life alone in that garage, working on your truck." As we walked out of the gym together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The marriage was over, the lies were exposed, and the people who mattered most knew the truth. Seren had made her choice, and now she would live with it. As for me, I was finally free to make choices of my own. The following Saturday evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie for the second time. The face looking back at me was different from the one I'd seen just 2 weeks ago. More confident, more at peace with itself. My phone buzzed with a text from Ayla. "Ready when you are." I grabbed my keys and drove to her apartment, a small but elegant place near the college. She was waiting on the front steps, wearing an emerald green dress that brought out the color of her eyes. "You look beautiful," I said as she got into the truck. "Thank you. You look pretty good yourself." The drive to her parents' house took 20 minutes. We talked about safe topics: her job search, my work, the weather. Neither of us mentioned Seren, though her absence hung between us like an unspoken question. Robert and Margaret's house was lit up for the occasion, cars lining the driveway and street. 40 years of marriage was worth celebrating, especially after the upheaval of the past week. "Are you ready for this?" Ayla asked as we walked to the front door. "As ready as I'll ever be." Margaret answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw us together. "Brooks, Ayla, come in, come in." The house was full of relatives and family friends, people I'd known for years through holiday gatherings and special occasions. The conversation was warm and welcoming, though I could sense the undercurrent of curiosity about my presence with Ayla. We made our way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Several people mentioned how nice it was to see me looking happy again. At 8 o'clock, Robert called for everyone's attention. "Margaret and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. 40 years of marriage has taught us many things, but the most important is that family isn't just about lineage. It's about the people who stand by you when times get tough." He looked directly at me. "Brooks, you've been a son to us for over 20 years. That hasn't changed, and it never will." The room erupted in applause. I felt Ayla squeeze my hand. "We also want to welcome our daughter Ayla back from her adventures in Europe. We're proud of the woman she's become and grateful to have her home." More applause. Ayla smiled and nodded to the crowd. "Now," Robert continued, "let's eat, drink, and celebrate the blessings in our lives." As the party resumed, people approached us individually. Most were supportive, expressing their shock at Seren's behavior and their hope that I would find happiness again. Around 9 o'clock, there was a commotion near the front door. Voices were raised, and I could hear Margaret saying, "I don't think that's a good idea." Seren appeared in the doorway to the living room. She looked terrible, pale, thin, her eyes red from crying. She was alone. The room went quiet as she scanned the crowd, her gaze finally settling on me and Ayla standing together near the fireplace. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice barely audible. I looked at Ayla, who nodded slightly. "Of course," I said, walking toward her. "You are my wife's sister now, but what exactly do you want to talk about?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Serene's face went white as the implications sank in. Around the room, people began to understand what I was really saying. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just Ayla's sister. And I was here with Ayla. Seren opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She looked around the room at the faces of family and friends who had once loved and supported her. Now they just looked disappointed. She began, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the house. Through the window, I watched her get into her Honda and drive away. The party resumed, but the mood had shifted. People were more subdued, processing what they'd just witnessed. "That was brutal," Ayla said quietly. "It was necessary." "Do you think she'll be okay?" I considered the question. "Eventually. Serene's tough. She'll land on her feet." "And Kirk?" "Kirk Dorsey will move on to his next victim. That's what predators do." We stayed until 11, helping Margaret clean up and saying goodbye to relatives. As we prepared to leave, Robert pulled me aside. "Brooks, I want you to know that what happened tonight doesn't change anything between us. You're still family." "I appreciate that, Robert. It means everything to me." "Take care of our girl," he said, glancing at Ayla. "I will." The drive home was quiet. When we reached Ayla's apartment, she invited me up for coffee. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm sure." Her apartment was warm and comfortable, filled with books and art from her travels. We sat on her couch with our coffee, finally allowing ourselves to process everything that